Hello and welcome. You're watching Gravitas. I'm Molly Gambhir. Let's get started.
Economy.
Queen Elizabeth II, the longest reigning British monarch, has passed away at the age of 96. There is no one way to summarize a 70-year-long reign. Her life, both professional and personal, her legacy, the challenges that she faced, and the controversies. In this edition of Gravitas, we touch upon all these facets, the many layers, and tell you more about what the Queen's demise means for the UK and what happens here onwards.
Hey! Ah!
It is the end of an era. Queen Elizabeth II passed away last evening. She was the longest reigning monarch in British history, a constant in British life for 70 years, a head of state who witnessed the rise and fall of 15 British prime ministers and 14 US presidents. Queen Elizabeth II witnessed some of the most defining moments in world history: the Suez Crisis, the Cold War, the first manned landing on the moon, the birth of the Internet, the attack on the World Trade Centers, and the many global conflicts, from Falklands to Afghanistan and now Ukraine. She saw it all. There are millions in the UK who have not lived in a world without Queen Elizabeth. For them, she was the only sovereign they knew. The entire country is in mourning. The United Kingdom has come to a grinding halt. Multiple allies of the UK as well are mourning the Queen's demise. Let's bring you up to speed with the latest. Queen Elizabeth II passed away last night. She died at Balmoral, the Scottish estate of the British royal family. She had spent much of her summer there, but last evening there were sudden developments. The Queen's doctor spoke out. They were concerned about her health and recommended that she remain under medical supervision. Senior royals started gathering at Balmoral, and within a few hours, the palace made the announcement. Queen Elizabeth was no more. The UK's new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, was the first to pay tributes.
The death of Her Majesty the Queen is a huge shock to the nation and to the world. Queen Elizabeth II was the rock on which modern Britain was built. Today the crown passes, as it has done for more than 1,000 years, to our new monarch, our new head of state, His Majesty King Charles III. With the King's family, we mourn the loss of his mother, and as we mourn, we must come together as a people to support him, to help him bear the awesome responsibility that he now carries for us all.
Since then, The UK, along with British allies, are observing a period of mourning. Flags are flying at half-mast. Mourners remain gathered outside the Buckingham Palace. People have been leaving flowers outside other royal palaces and churches too. Thousands of church bells were rung out across the country in the memory of the Queen. Like I said before, the entire UK has come to a standstill. The Bank of England has decided to postpone a key meeting to review the UK's monetary policy. The UK's trade unions, postal workers, rail staff were supposed to go on a strike, and they have decided to call off their plans as a mark of respect for the Queen. The British Parliament was called into session. The MPs paid their tributes. Tributes have also been pouring in from around the world. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi sent his condolences too. He called Queen Elizabeth a stalwart of our times. He said, and I'm quoting, "Queen Elizabeth provided inspiring leadership to her nation and people and personified dignity and decency in public life." For the entire day today, the focus has been on King Charles. He immediately inherited the throne from his mother. King Charles spent the night at Balmoral. He was at the Queen's bedside in the final moments alongside his sister, Princess Anne. King Charles issued a statement too. He said his mother's death was a moment of greatest sadness for him and all members of the family. After his return to London today, King Charles went to the Buckingham Palace. He met with several people who had gathered outside.
The call stopped. That's why I think they've got their lips open. Got me out. God bless you, Charles. God bless you. You've got big shoes to fill. I know you'll do.
King Charles will deliver his first address to the nation later tonight. He met with the British Prime Minister Liz Truss a short while back. There was a royal gun salute too. 96 rounds were fired, one for each year of the Queen's life. So what happens next? There will be a state funeral for Queen Elizabeth soon. It will happen at the Westminster Abbey in London. She will be laid to rest at St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle. That's where her husband, Prince Philip, was buried last year when he passed away. King Charles's accession to the throne will be officially proclaimed tomorrow. Andrew Whitehead, senior journalist, joining us now from London. Andrew, the sense of shock persists in the UK. Tell us more about what the Queen's demise really means for the United Kingdom.
Well, she's been a symbol of continuity, even for people who are not that young like me. I've never known any other monarch. She's been at the helm through war, through turmoil, through economic crisis, and through as many as 15 different prime ministers, including the one that she installed just this week, Liz Truss. And that sense of stability that she's engendered is one that the British people have valued. And of course, her own personal qualities, the humility, that deep sense of public service are greatly valued. I think the mood, though, is starting to change. So it's not as somber as it was in the immediate aftermath of the announcement yesterday. And certainly looking at the pictures of King Charles when he arrived and entered Buckingham Palace for the first time, and he stopped to talk to mourners. The mourners were clearly very excited to see the new king. One woman I noticed kissed him on the cheek, another one kissed his hand, some passed him flowers, others shouted "Long live the King," or there were informal renditions of "God save the King," which is now the new wording of the national anthem. So the mood is both respecting all that the late Queen achieved, but also welcoming and honouring the change to the new monarch.
The code word for the operation that was activated after the Queen's demise, Operation Unicorn. Tell us more about why it is called that and what all it entails, because that would help our viewers understand what happens from here onwards.
Well, so there are lots of code words for what happens in the event of a death or a crisis in the royal family. And the code phrase for the death of the monarch was "London Bridge is down." But there's another code word in the event that the Queen died in Balmoral, her home in the Scottish Highlands, and that is unicorn. And the unicorn is part of the Scottish national emblem and insignia. And so that has laid out the plan of what happens to the Queen's body. It will go, we believe, initially to Edinburgh, and it will lie in state there in the Scottish capital for 1 or 2 days before being flown to London, lying in state in Westminster Hall, the 1,000-year-old building next to the Houses of Parliament. And then, as you said, there will be a funeral in Westminster Abbey in about 10 days' time, we believe.
Andrew Whitehead, thanks very much for joining us here on the broadcast. The Queen was 96 years old when she died. She spent 70 of those on the British throne. She has seen dozens of world leaders come and go. She has seen the arrival of the internet. She has seen wars, recessions, and pandemics. It's hard to condense such an eventful life into a few minutes, but we have tried nonetheless. Here's a look at the highlights of Queen Elizabeth II's life and reign.
At my coronation, I shall dedicate myself anew to your service. But I want to ask you all, whatever your religion may be, to pray for me on that day. To pray that God may give me wisdom and strength to carry out the solemn promises I shall be making, and that I may faithfully serve Him and you all the days of my life.
It was a somber morning on the 6th of February 1952, when 25-year-old Elizabeth Windsor acceded to the throne. That momentous day was full of sorrow for the young monarch, who had just lost her father. A year later, on the 2nd of June 1953, Elizabeth was crowned the head of state of the UK and 15 other Commonwealth realms, and thus began her royal journey. Born on the 21st of April 1926, Elizabeth Alexandra Mary was the first child of the Duke and Duchess of York. Her father, King George VI, ascended the throne 10 years after her birth, and Elizabeth dedicated her life in service to the Commonwealth 11 years later. In November 1947, Elizabeth Alexandra married her sweetheart, Prince Philip Mountbatten. The Queen acceded to the throne at a time when tea was still carefully being rationed. It was shortly after the economically devastating World War II. Britain soon found a comfortable ground. The economy grew. So did the royal family. The Queen witnessed the marriage of all her children, the birth of 8 grandchildren and 12 great-grandchildren. Royal successes, royal troubles, and royally sensationalized splits. and the loss of members of the royal family. She saw it all. There is a famous saying, the prime ministers come and go, but the Queen stays the same. Queen Elizabeth II is the UK's longest reigning monarch. She saw 15 prime ministers under her reign, from confidant Winston Churchill to the latest leader of her government, Liz Truss. In a world where the royals are criticized for being stuck in its past glory, Queen Elizabeth was viewed as an early modernizer of the monarchy.
25 years ago,
in 1970, she televised a special program with the BBC, based on their everyday lives.
the subtle corruption of the system.
It was the first time the British public had a window into what royal domestic life looked like. As the years went by, royal dramas began to envelop the Buckingham Palace, and it peaked in 1992, the Annus Horribilis, the year when the House of Windsor Castle went up in flames. But the monarchy faced one of its toughest tests in 1997, when Princess Diana died in a car crash in Paris. The Queen's initial silence didn't help, but the Queen's admiration of Diana in her address to the nation later proved to be the saving grace.
She was an exceptional and gifted human being.
As the years went by, the Queen's choices, her favorites, became a matter of public interest. From the Queen's favorite cake to her especially bred dogs. The Queen and the royal family have been regularly featured in the tabloids. The Queen's reign continued, and so did the troubles and increased scrutiny of the royal family. Prince Andrew, believed by many to be her favorite child, faced allegations of sexual assault and has retreated to the background in recent years. Then came Prince Harry's decision to quit royal duties and move to California with his wife Meghan. It was the beginning of a bitter feud within the House of Windsor. The biggest personal blow came last year, when the Queen bid goodbye to her husband, Prince Philip. Around that time, the Queen's health also became a cause of concern. Queen Elizabeth, also known as Lilibet by her doting family, was never big on splendor. She also was a stern monarch when it came to business. She took a serious and informed interest in government business.
Things can change for the better.
Aside from the traditional and ceremonial duties, the Queen spent her final days at her favorite royal residence, the Balmoral Castle. With her passing, it is truly the end of an era. And the big question now is on the survival of the British monarchy. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
It is said being the Queen is a privilege. The lifestyle, travel, the luxuries, everything is paid for by the taxpayer. Your job is to smile and wave, they say. But for Queen Elizabeth II, that was not always the case. She inherited the throne in 1952. By then, the sun had set on the British Empire. Their economy was crippled by World War II. Their colonies were declaring independence one by one. And the world no longer revolved around Britain. That wasn't the case for other queens. Most historians talk about the big three: Queen Elizabeth I, Queen Victoria, and Queen Elizabeth II. Put together, they reigned for around 178 years. Let's discuss the first two queens. Elizabeth I ruled over a golden era in Britain. Back then, monarchy was the norm. During her rule, English literature flourished. The likes of William Shakespeare and Christopher Marlowe shot to fame. It was also the age of seafaring. Maritime legends like Francis Drake expanded Britain's naval prowess. So the first Elizabethan age was a success story. Same with Queen Victoria. She reigned for almost 63 years. During this period, Britain attained superpower status. The Industrial Revolution gathered momentum. The empire expanded. How does the second Elizabethan age compare to that? Remember, she was the longest reigning monarch in British history. She was on the throne for 70 years. So the longevity by itself is a legacy. But that is not her biggest contribution. The Queen's biggest contribution was making the monarchy acceptable, perhaps even relevant. Let me give you two reasons why. Number one, the era that she reigned in, the 20th century, saw 2 world wars and multiple freedom movements. The colonies broke free. Human rights movements were gathering steam. Democracy was the catchphrase everywhere. And in that context, monarchies were like dinosaurs. They should have been wiped out by the march of time. In fact, in many places, that is exactly what happened. Portugal, Germany, Italy, Bulgaria, Greece, Romania, Russia, Turkey. All these countries abandoned their monarchy in the 20th century. Not all of them replaced it with a better system, but nonetheless, the era of blue blood was over. Not the case with Britain. Even after World War II, they persisted with the monarchy. A lot of credit for that goes to Queen Elizabeth II. She was loved and respected all over the world. People accepted her as a titular head in the era of democracy. And that in itself is a huge achievement. Reason number 2, the ugly history of the British Empire. Today, we know the royals as soft power props, but their ancestors did some horrible stuff. Slavery, forced labor, discrimination, massacres. All of this was a staple of the British crown. Yet, the monarchy was loved around the world. Even former colonies enjoyed great relations with the royal family. Why? Again, because of Queen Elizabeth II. She sort of baptized her family's past. She made the world see the monarchy from a new perspective. Not as powerful tyrants for privileged aristocracy, but as a non-controversial figurehead. We can debate why she did that. Was it a genuine effort to reform an outdated system, or was it to protect her privileges and wealth? I guess we'll never know. But here's what we can say for sure. The Queen gave the world a template for constitutional monarchies. She retained the crown's mystical air, and at the same time, she convinced the world of her relevance. And that is not easy to do. British citizens say the Queen is a symbol of national unity and strength. Perhaps her predecessors were, but Queen Elizabeth II presided over a weakening union. Under her, Britain lost the status of superpower. Under her, Britain left the European Union. Under her, Scotland held an independence referendum. I guess you could look at it in 2 ways. One, the Queen held the country together despite these setbacks. Or 2, all these setbacks happened during her reign. Whichever way you look at it, Queen Elizabeth II's legacy looms large over global politics. She was a giant of the 20th century. And reluctantly or not, she dragged a medieval institution into 2022. Because let's face it, monarchies don't belong in the 21st century. But the Queen convinced the world to not just accept it, but celebrate it. And when you rule for 70 years, you inevitably have highs and lows. We have talked about the Queen's life, legacy, and family. Let's now talk about the controversies. First, the regressive family culture. Honestly, this was bound to happen. You cannot put a medieval institution in the 21st century, and if you do, there will be contradictions. In the Queen's case, she battled a lot of these contradictions. Diana and Charles were clearly not in a happy relationship. Their extramarital affairs were on most front pages, but the Queen ignored it, trying to brush all the toxicity under the carpet. In fact, the whole family preferred to do that. Diana would later speak about how she contemplated suicide, how she felt alone in the family. And that really boils down to the Queen herself. As the head of the family, it was her responsibility. Almost 2 decades later, history repeated itself, this time with Meghan Markle. She said she faced discrimination and loneliness in the family. all the pressure, all the expectations. It became too much for her to handle. What was the result? She and Prince Harry chose to resettle in the United States. Both these episodes reveal a larger problem with the family. They are torn between happiness and so-called notions of duty. Another issue many historians talk about is the Queen's refusal to apologize for the past. She has indeed admitted colonial crimes. She has also visited sites of British excesses, but she has stopped short of apologizing for them. In hindsight, should she have done so? After all, the British Empire was not some benevolent institution. It was ruthless, racist, and vicious. If the empire existed today, it would probably be accused of crimes against humanity. Let me give you some examples. The Jallianwala Bagh massacre, the Bengal famine, the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya, all of these could easily be prosecuted at any tribunal. But the Queen never apologized for any of it. She may not have been directly involved in these, but she was the modern face of the institution responsible. So perhaps an apology was necessary. During her 70 years on the throne, Queen Elizabeth II was considered a passive monarch. She never interfered in British politics, but recently there was a worrying report. The Guardian reported that the Queen lobbied to change a proposed law in 2021. Now, why did she do that? The law would have forced the Queen to disclose the scale of her assets, all her shareholdings, real estate, everything. So the Queen allegedly sent her private lawyer to get an exemption. And if this did happen, it would have been a rare event. Most British Prime Ministers say the Queen never interfered in legislation. She did everything that the government asked her to do. Yet, this 2021 report will be a blot on her record. You could, in a way, say the same about her personal life. People close to her praised the late Queen for her dedication to work, but towards her family, not so much. King Charles once described her as a distant mother. 3 of her 4 children ended up getting a divorce. What does this reveal about Queen Elizabeth's personal life? Our next report explores.
Divorce, remarriage, affairs. During her 70-year reign, Queen Elizabeth saw it all. She may have been a rock for 67 million Britons, but her own family was far from perfect. Maybe it was the burden of royal duties, or maybe the public glare. Whatever the reason, the Queen's personal life consistently made headlines in the last few decades. Her relation with Charles was always strange. According to biographers, more Queen subject than mother-son. Charles would later say his mother was detached, not indifferent. That detachment would snowball into bigger controversies, his divorce with Diana being one of them. Initially, the Queen did not approve of the now Queen consort Camilla. She tried her best to dissuade Charles, but in the end, he got his way. A bigger setback was Prince Andrew. He was reportedly the Queen's favourite child. In 2019, murky details emerged of his relations with Jeffrey Epstein. He faces child sex abuse charges in the United States. Andrew responded in the worst possible manner. He sat down for a train wreck interview with the BBC. The sweating, rambling prince was declared guilty by social media. Soon, he was cut off from royal duties. With Princess Anne, the Queen had better luck. She shared the Queen's interest in horses. Anne would grow up to be a fine equestrian. But she too had family trouble. Her first marriage ended in 1992, and within months she remarried. Queen Elizabeth also had 8 grandchildren, but the spotlight was always on 2 of them, Prince William and Harry. William is now heir to the throne. The Queen reportedly shared excellent relations with him, but Prince Harry proved to be a lot harder. The younger prince decided to marry an American divorcee, Meghan Markle. Though the Queen was reluctant at first, she gave her blessings. But the friction never disappeared. In 2020, the couple gave up their royal duties. They moved across the Atlantic and settled in the United States. From there, they criticized the royal family. Meghan Markle accused the royal household of racism. She said she even contemplated suicide at one point. The criticism was a crisis like no other for the Queen. Buckingham Palace promised to investigate the claims, but the family bond certainly weakened. Looking back at the challenges that the Queen's personal life and the challenges she faced, 3 of her 4 children ended up divorced. One of them was accused of adultery. Her daughters-in-law had a complicated relationship with her, and later so did her grandson and his wife. For most families, that's just life, but not for the Queen of England. Queen Elizabeth also headed the Church of England, meaning she had to defend traditional Christian values, like the idea of a perfect marriage, or that of a dutiful spouse. Biographers are split over why the Queen's personal life was the way it was. Was it because she was distant, or was it because of the monarchy's unbridled entitlement? Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
We know what happened between King Charles III and Princess Diana. We also know that Princess Anne's first marriage fell apart. We have all seen Prince Andrew's fall. While the personal lives of some senior royals have been openly discussed in public, not much really is known about the Queen. What did she like? What did she not like? We know for a matter of fact that Queen Elizabeth II loved dogs, especially corgis. She reportedly had 30 of them through her reign. The pooches were often seen waddling around her in the palace and the palace grounds. Safe to say, the Queen made corgis famous. They featured along with her in the 2012 London Olympics video. Even shared space on the 2016 cover of Vanity Fair. What made the Queen fall in love with this breed of dogs? Their energy. Elizabeth II's first corgi was gifted to her by her father, King George VI. Back then, Elizabeth was 7. She named the corgi Dookie. When she was 16, Elizabeth was gifted another corgi. This one was named Susan, and it is from Susan that the royal line of corgis descended. The Queen once said her corgis are family. She would often take care of their feeding, take them for their walks. She loved corgis so much that a new breed was created just for her. It was called the Doggy, a cross between Corgi and Dachshund. Reports say in 2015, the Queen stopped breeding corgis. Why, you ask? She reportedly did not want to leave any young ones behind. During her final days, the Queen had 4 dogs, 2 Welsh corgis, a doggy, and a cocker spaniel. They will all now likely be taken care of by the royal family. The Queen's love for animals did not end with dogs. Elizabeth II's love for horses is well documented. It is said that she was first introduced to horses at the age of 2. The year was 1928, and Elizabeth had accompanied her parents to Northamptonshire for hunting. And as the young princess was growing up, she found herself surrounded by family members who owned horses, rode horses, bred horses, and talked about horses. The young Elizabeth would go around the palace pulling a toy horse behind her. At 5, Elizabeth's father, King George VI, gifted her a pony. She began her riding lessons around the same time and soon started picking riding prizes. Queen Elizabeth II went on to breed and race horses for 60 years. She inherited her father's horses and would often find an escape in horses, horse management and breeding. The Queen's horses have won 4 out of 5 flat racing classics. Mares from her stables have also been sent around the world. The Queen also loved her gin cocktails. Her favorite was gin and Dubonnet with a slice of lemon. This cocktail became quite popular in Britain around the 1920s. That's when the Queen's mother took a liking for it, and naturally the Queen inherited the taste. Queen Elizabeth II enjoyed her gin before lunch. And I don't know how many of you know this, but the Queen also launched her own brands of gin. The first one has ingredients from the Buckingham Palace, and the second one was launched by the Queen's Sandringham estate. That said, the Queen did not like eating like an emperor. She ate simple food. She had her personal cooks who served her food from a set menu. On days when she was not entertaining guests during breakfast, she would stick to warm toasts. Lunch and dinner would usually include a lot of vegetables. The Queen loved poached salmons but did not indulge much. Also, she checked her intake of meat. The Queen's only indulgence being chocolates. Her tea was mostly Earl Grey or Silver Tips Imperial tea from Assam. The Queen drank her tea without milk or sugar. She likes sandwiches, light sandwiches on the side, or light tea cakes. Chocolate cakes were her favorite. Reports say the Queen communicated with the chefs through a red leather book. She would put down the notes about what she wants to eat or what she did not like about a particular dish. And finally, here's another thing we know that the Queen liked for sure, and that's hunting. If you have seen The Crown, then you already know all about the Queen's hunting expedition. The Queen went on a hunt even during her visit to India. She was accompanied by Maharani Gayatri Devi of Jaipur, the Maharaja and Prince Philip. During the hunting trip, Prince Philip managed to shoot a tiger. And this is a photo of the group posing with the dead beast. And photographs like these were obviously not always received kindly.
Thousands of you in this country have had to leave your homes and be separated from your fathers and mothers. My sister Margaret Rose and I feel so much for you, as we know from experience what it means to be away from those we love most of all. I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong. Years ago, the great American nation was born at this historic place. I cannot think of a more appropriate point for us to start our visit to the United States.
With the Queen's passing, the focus shifts to the King, King Charles III. He was born to be the King 73 years ago. Now he needs to do the job. King Charles will not be unaware about his responsibilities. After all, he has been preparing for decades. In recent years, his role has been steadily expanding. Charles often stepped in for his mother at royal ceremonies. He undertook foreign trips and led investitures where recipients are granted knighthood. His most notable appearance came earlier this year. King Charles delivered the Queen's speech at the British Parliament in May. This happens whenever a new session begins. It's similar to the President's address to the Indian Parliament at the beginning of every session. In the speech, King Charles, who served as the Prince back then, set out the agenda for the British government. So in the final years of the Queen, King Charles was taking on more constitutional responsibility. But now he takes the helm of the royal family, and that brings with it big changes. He'll be the head of state, not just for the UK, but also for 14 other Commonwealth nations. This includes countries like Australia and Canada. King Charles will also serve as the head of the Commonwealth. This is a grouping of 56 countries. He also becomes the head of the British Armed Forces, the judiciary, the civil service, and the supreme governor of the Church of England. A lot of these responsibilities remain largely ceremonial, but the British sovereign has a few more important roles to play, granting royal assent to bills and being a confidant for prime ministers. British sovereigns have worked closely with their prime ministers. They hold regular meetings with them throughout their time in office. The prime ministers must inform and brief the sovereign about government policy. While a sovereign is constitutionally required to remain strictly neutral, they do have the space to influence the upcoming bills. So what kind of sovereign will King Charles be? Will he be discreet like his mother, Queen Elizabeth, who maintained strict political neutrality, or will King Charles carve out a different path for himself and speak his mind about issues? It's difficult to say. However, as Prince, Charles did try to chalk out his legacy. He is a patron or a president of more than 400 charities as of today. And in addition to that, he founded the Prince's Trust. It has helped nearly 1 million youth who are disadvantaged. Personally, King Charles has championed environmental causes, but in recent times, his philanthropy work has run into trouble. One of the charities of King Charles was accused of taking a donation from the family of Osama bin Laden. And then there was the Cash for Honor scandal. A close aide of King Charles allegedly offered knighthood to a billionaire Saudi donor. This was apparently in exchange for donations. There is also the impending fallout from the Epstein revelations. Prince Andrew alleged links with sex offender Jeffrey Epstein have invited scrutiny from the investigators. Prince Andrew is the brother of King Charles, and soon after the claims came out, he was forced to step back from royal duties. So those are some of the short-term challenges for King Charles. He has some pretty big shoes to fill. Queen Elizabeth, even in her final years, remained the most popular royal. She was the longest-serving monarch in British history. Charles does not enjoy the same level of popularity. There will also be attention on the role of the Queen Consort Camilla. Queen Elizabeth chose that title for her. It is a request that she made in February this year. Let me tell you what she said. And when, in the fullness of time, my son Charles becomes king, I know you will give him and his wife Camilla the same support that you have given me, and it is my sincere wish that when that time comes, Camilla will be known as Queen Consort as she continues her own loyal service. Will Camilla stick with the same title, or will she be given the title of the Queen? How will King Charles navigate these issues? These decisions will define his legacy. Let's now tell you what else made news. Time for Gravitas Global Headlines.
8 people killed and over 17 injured in Russian attacks in the eastern city of Bakhmut, as Ukraine pushes to recapture parts of Donbas. European Union energy ministers meet to discuss ways to shield citizens from sky-high energy prices as Russia turns off gas supplies to Europe in standoff over Ukraine. Iran's latest reply on a nuclear deal is a step backwards, says U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, insisting Washington would not rush to rejoin at any cost. Tigrayan rebels have proposed a conditional truce in the war in northern Ethiopia as fresh fighting forced a halt to aid deliveries in the stricken Tigray region. Floodwater from Pakistan's largest lake, Lake Manchar, has submerged hundreds of villages in the southern part of Sindh province. 12 more deaths reported on Thursday take the toll to 1,355. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres appealed to the world for help for Pakistan as he arrived in the country. Switzerland clarifies that it has not officially summoned China's ambassador over a UN report listing serious abuses in China's Xinjiang region, but has invited him to a meeting. North Korea has passed a law allowing it to carry out a preventative nuclear strike and declaring its status as a nuclear-armed state irreversible. The United States has sanctioned an Iranian company that helped to ship drones to Russia for use in Ukraine, warns non-Iranian firms against becoming involved in the trade. Olympic champion Neeraj Chopra becomes the first Indian athlete to win a Diamond League finals title in Zurich. Chopra's second attempt of 88.44 meters was good enough for him to take the men's javelin title. World number 1 Iga Świątek overcomes a spirited Aryna Sabalenka to set up a summit clash with Ons Jabeur for the women's singles title at the US Open. The Tunisian defeated Caroline Garcia in the semis.
On that note, it's a wrap on this edition. We're leaving you with Gravitas Images. Thanks very much for watching.
Thank you for having me. I do hope you're having a lovely jubilee. Tea? Oh, yes, please. Oh, terribly sorry.
Never mind.
Helicopter awaits.
And His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh, accompanied by the President of the International Olympic Committee, Jacques Rogge.
And the crowd have loved it.